Chapter 4. Our plan was surgically precise. Me Sun was still annoyed with me, but she got her head back in the game pretty quickly. We entered the precinct, and Alice went up to the policeman at the front desk to ask for help. She was probably best of all of us at appearing sympathetic, so while she told some story about a missing parent, the rest of us hung back like we were her friends, there to support her. In fact, we were all busy. Me Sun hacked into the station's records to get the layout of the prison. Charles checked on the security camera feeds, getting a sense of what sort of opposition we could anticipate. I, meanwhile, used the sabotage branch of my skill tree. Yeah, I had one of those. To create a communication-dampening field over the precinct building. No one could call for help or report our infiltration until we were long gone. We all pinged Alice once we had completed our tasks, so she'd know when we were ready for the next stage. Then, in the middle of speaking to a bored and unsympathetic policeman, she stunned him. Charles, Me Sun, and I took care of the rest of the room. We sealed the front door so no one could get in or out, and we moved on to where the prisoners were being held. There were several layers of locked doors which we blasted through until we reached the holding cells. Prisoners on either side shouted at us, and much of what they had to say wasn't very nice. Clearly, these were garden-variety criminals. People hadn't stopped breaking the law just because there had been an alien invasion, so there was no way I was going to let them go free. Beyond these cells, we came to a maximum security holding pen. I accessed the panel that controlled the electronic lock and broke through in a matter of seconds. The door swung open to reveal a room with no chairs or beds, no furnishings of any kind except a single metal toilet and sink. Sitting on the floor were Steve, Dr. Roop, and Volonic. They wore the same clothes as when we'd last seen them, and they didn't look like they'd been hurt. "Where's Tamret?" I said.
"Finally you're here," Volonic answered. "There is no private toilet, and I had to use the facilities in front of them. It was humiliating."
Steve was kind enough to not make me ask a second time.
"They've kept us separate, mate. They said because she's female. She should be fine. They haven't bothered us since they threw us in here. Just a lot of sitting around. And watching him use the loo was no fun for the rest of us, let me tell you."
I heard something in his voice that I didn't like. "What happened before they threw you in here?"
"There were some unkind words," Dr. Roop said regretfully. "Some disparaging comments on our being non-human. The words were spoke with malicious intent, but I could not let them trouble me. And I hardly think Tamret would be vulnerable to that sort of thing."
"Let's find her," I said.
"One moment,"
Volonic said, his expression showing some obvious feline fear.
"Most of us are now safe. Is it really advisable to go further into the enemy compound to rescue just one more?"
"Are you serious?" I asked him. "I'd keep going if you were the only one we hadn't rescued. You expect me to leave Tamret behind?"
"I merely point out that it might not be wise," he said. "We mustn't be reckless."
"Yeah, we must,"
Steve said, and put a hand on Volonic's shoulder. He pushed him forward. We made our way further into the facility, looking in cells and kicking down doors, but there was no sign of her. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It made sense that they might separate out the only female, but why keep her so far away? I tried to tell myself that I was anxious because I wanted to see her, because I wanted to know for a fact that she was safe, but something didn't seem right. We came to another steel door protected by a keypad. I quickly hacked the encryption and the door swung open, revealing an antechamber. A dusty little room with a few filing cabinets, a table with a coffee maker, and a metal desk at which sat a balding, middle-aged policeman. "Where is she?" I demanded. His eyes bulged as he looked at the aliens with us, so he had no doubt who I was talking about.
In there,"
he said.
"But you can't go inside without the combination and—"
That was as far as he got. I stepped over his unconscious body and quickly bypassed the security system. This was probably faster than entering the correct code. The metal door clicked open. We were instantly met by PPB fire. Charles and Alice set up the defensive shielding as we planned. Me Sun and I were going on the offensive, and I had no doubt Steve would join us without a second's thought. There were 2 fads in the room, and 1 human. The fads were the ones firing at us, and the human was farther back. The room itself was large, a lab, not a cell, filled with computers, glass bottles, beakers, and shelves full of various equipment I couldn't identify. On a gurney towards the back of the room lay Tamret, eyes open but immobile. She was in the clothes she'd been wearing when she was captured, but her sleeves had been rolled up so IVs could be inserted. A tangle of plastic tubes pumped chemicals into her arms, and several thick straps held her bound tightly to the gurney. Standing behind her, a syringe in her hand, was Nora Price, the Supreme Viceroy herself. This woman was now running a world, but here she was, taking the time out of her busy schedule to mess with Tamret. Could this be about our history? The fact that she'd been unable to deliver me to the Fads had made her look bad, but I doubted that whatever was going on here was about me or my friends and the things we'd done. Mrs. Price was probably as evil as they come, but I didn't think she would be vindictive unless there was a payoff for her at the end. These thoughts went through my mind as I saw the two Fads, who had been raising their weapons, go down. Me-Sun and Alice had zapped them, maybe leaving Mrs. Price for me. I aimed at her, but Dr. Roop put a hand on my forearm.
"We may need to know what she's done to Tamret," he said.
"I found something a bit more refined than just blasting her with electricity," Me-Sun said. She jerked out a hand, and a wave of blue energy hit the lower part of Mrs. Price's body. She fell heavily to the floor, but was still conscious, though now gasping for air like a freshly caught fish. "She's temporarily immobilized from the waist down," Me-Sun explained. I ran over to Tamret, who was lying completely still, but her eyes were darting back and forth. I could see the fury in them, but she seemed to be unable to speak, let alone struggle against her restraints. "I'm going to get you out of here," I said. I looked down at Nora Price. "What did you do to Tamret?"
"Hello to you too, Zeke," she said through gritted teeth.
I didn't know if the paralyzing effect somehow hurt or if she was just frustrated, but I didn't much care. "Answer the question," I demanded.
"Or what?"
She laughed.
"You're pretty tough when it comes to ship-to-ship combat, but I don't think you've got what it takes to actually kill another person face-to-face."
Dr. Roop stepped forward, maybe worried about what exactly I had planned next. Nora Price had betrayed humanity in general, and me in particular. She had sided with the Fads out of a desire for power, and now she'd hurt Tamret. I didn't know what I was prepared to do to help Tamret, but I wasn't going to rule out anything just yet.
"Whatever they're giving Tamret must be some sort of suppressant for her upgrades," he said quietly. "Otherwise, I'm not sure they would be able to hold her against her will. She should be able to repair herself once the upgrades are allowed to do their work. I think if we disconnect her, she should be fine."
"And what if you're wrong?"
"We have just overtaken a law enforcement station in which the Supreme Viceroy was conducting experiments. It is only a matter of time before our enemies notice something is amiss, and they come to overwhelm us with force. I believe it is time to take a chance."
I looked at Tamret. There was something in her eyes that told me she agreed with Dr. Roop. It was like she was telling me his plan was the way to go. I nodded, and began removing the IV needles from her arm. The effect was almost instantaneous. Before I'd even finished unfastening her restraints, Tamret gasped for breath like she'd been underwater. She raised her head to watch me, and as soon as the restraints were off, she sat up. "Let's go," she said. "Tamret, are you—" "Forget it," she snapped. "I'll be fine. And I don't want to stand around and wait for whatever they're going to throw at us." I glanced back at Nora Price, who flashed me a humorless smile. There was nothing I could do about her. We couldn't take her with us, and it wasn't as though I was prepared to execute her. Besides, she was only a lickspittle, if I may use the word, working for a more powerful, if not more evil, being. If she weren't around, the Fads wouldn't have any problem finding someone else to stand in as their human head. I told myself she was unimportant. "You can't keep doing this forever, Zeke," she called out to me. "You're going to make a mistake." I wanted to make some kind of snappy comeback, to tell her that she would be the one running from us, but I didn't want to say anything that even hinted at our plans, so I walked away, saying nothing. I put a hand on Tamret's shoulder, but she shrugged me off. "I'm fine," she said. "You don't have to keep checking on me." She wasn't fine. I could see that, but I couldn't make her talk to me. We hurried past the prisoners and then through the precinct full of unconscious policemen. Other than the two who had been in the lab with Nora Price, we hadn't seen a single Fad. But I told myself that didn't mean anything. I was sure they didn't hang out, drinking coffee and playing darts with the local humans. When they finally decided to show up in force, we'd be facing some real opposition. We found the stairs leading over to the parking garage, and then selected a van. No keys required when you are fully loaded, as we were. Steve uploaded some basic instructions on how to operate the vehicle and played tentatively with the gas and brake pedals while we all nervously buckled up.
Seems pretty basic,
he said thoughtfully, while he examined the gear shift and tried to get comfortable with the standard driver's seat. He couldn't sit all the way down, and his tail was pressed against the back of the seat and dangled over his own shoulder.
Using my feet will take some getting used to, but I'll learn as we go.
So saying, we lurched out of the parking spot and onto the main street.